Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. The budget cap drama continues. In just 2 days time, the FIA will release the statement saying whether certain teams breached the cost cap for 2021. Christian Horner is adamant that there were no breaches for Red Bull and even has gone as far to threaten legal action against Mercedes and Ferrari for their so-called defamatory statements over the last several days. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you are new as always. I'd greatly appreciate a couple of updates for you guys. Firstly, just to confirm, as we looked at yesterday, that indeed Perez did win the Singapore Grand Prix. Now, this is rather interesting to me, the explanation that the FIA came out with. It took several hours for them to come to a decision. So there apparently were 3 separate instances where Perez dropped too far back from the safety car beyond the 10 car length limit when, of course, the many safety cars were coming out. Lap 10 on Inters, he apparently dropped behind. He was reprimanded for this. Then the second time, lap 36, he was warned by the race director, and then later in the lap, he then got a 5-second penalty for repeating that occurrence effectively. Now, what is especially interesting here to me is because, of course, he ends up getting a 5-second penalty across 3 instances. This might make sense. Reprimand, warning, penalty. And look, I don't really think the race result should be changed. I think Perez deserved the victory on the day, and the whole safety car thing was a relatively minor detail, but it is worthy of note, right? Because, look, Perez won the race by 7.5 seconds. If he'd have won the race by 12.5 seconds, let's just say, would they have given a 5-second penalty, or would they have given 2 5-second penalties that Ferrari wanted, saying, okay, look, you got a warning, and then 2 penalties for 2 repeated instances? That's what Ferrari thought was viable, and maybe they're right about that, but it seems to me that the FIA really do like, and maybe understandably, but they do really like keeping the result as it was, and of course we'll never know, but I do wonder whether they would have had a different opinion had Perez won by, let's say, 12 seconds or whatever, and would have maybe given him 2 penalties, who knows? Especially because, like, they actually mentioned here in the way they explain this, that although the track was wet in parts, we don't accept that the conditions were such that to make it impossible or dangerous for Perez to have maintained the required less than car length gap. So they're saying, look, the conditions were not great, but they were fine enough for him to stay within that limit. But Perez said to them, as you can see in the first paragraph, the conditions were wet and therefore it was difficult to closely follow with little heat in the tyres. So that was his explanation when he went to visit the stewards, and they said, well, we don't really think that's viable. But then in the very next sentence, they say, well, actually, we did take into account the wet conditions and the difficulties highlighted by Perez as mitigatory circumstances for the instance, and accordingly determined that a reprimand ought to be imposed. So really interesting kind of explanation here from the FIA, basically saying that we might well have given him 2 penalties for these 2 latter incidents, but then went on to say that, well, Perez did actually give an interesting perspective, right, that it was kind of difficult to achieve, therefore we only gave him a reprimand. So, I don't know, kind of interesting stuff. I don't really mind the way that their race result finished, but, the FIA is not covering themselves in glory at the present time. Neither, in fairness, were AlphaTauri yesterday. It's kind of funny now because Gasly, we believe, is almost guaranteed to go to Alpine, and De Vries is going to come in to the AlphaTauri seat, and he's not holding back on the team that he'll be leaving in a few races' time. He was really not happy at all about some of the decisions that AlphaTauri made in the race yesterday. He reckons that even 5th could have been on the cards, and of course it was McLaren that benefited massively under the safety car. Now, this is what we expect to happen this week. First of all, as I just mentioned, the announcement of Nick De Vries to AlphaTauri, Gasly to Alpine, but on Wednesday, just 2 days' time, the FIA is to provide information on all the budgets for 2021. Just this past weekend, rumours started circulating that 2 teams have breached the cost cap for last season. Now all the auditing has been done by the FIA. Rumours about how these teams might have achieved this using certain subsidiaries or whatever. But if you breach the cost cap, as Ferrari have pointed out many times already, an extra $5 million is the equivalent of an extra, 70, 75 engineers to work on making the car quicker, which will of course have a big impact, right? And potentially a retrospective look might be taken at last year's championship, the first year that a budget cap has really been imposed, cutting down on the amount of money that the top teams spent by a good, $50-100 million to try and level the playing field to a certain degree with the teams that don't have quite that budget. But of course, the top teams have incentive to try and feel their way through from a financial perspective so they can spend more money. Maybe teams are going to get caught out trying to exploit a loophole or whatever. Now, the 2 teams mentioned with this, of course, were firstly Aston Martin for what people believe to be a very minor breach, whether it's something to do with a factory or whatever they slightly went over. That is one part of it. The other team, of course, a big, well, and big talking point here was none other than Red Bull, right? Who some believe, Mercedes and Ferrari have even kind of implied that they believe an extra $5 million above the $145-ish million cap may have been spent by Red Bull, which is a pretty big deal when you consider that all of that money could have gone into aero development, where the 145 is spread over pretty much everything the team spends throughout the year. Now, Horner was not a happy buddy at all when these rumours started circulating. You could argue whether, he was overly defensive because he knows that they potentially have something to hide, but it does seem like they're very confident. He actually came out and said that they are absolutely confident that their budget was under the cost cap. Now, of course, their submission might have been under the limit. Whether the auditors determine that the reality is that their number is the correct number does remain to be seen. So the FIA is going to announce the results of its audit here on Wednesday, and then we will know whether teams have breached the number. Now, if Red Bull are marginally over, now I believe they consider a 5% breach to be a minor breach, and everything more than that is a material breach. But 5% is still an awful lot, really, when you think about it. It's 145 million, so a 5% breach could go up to like $7 million, and that I think a lot of teams would say that's a really serious breach, at least in some teams' perspective, maybe not in the FIA's rules, but there are still plenty of actions they can take to clamp down on a team that may have been doing this, right? And Toto Wolff and Binotto have been making the point the last few days that, like, look, if we had that extra money, we could have done a lot more last season than we did and made our car a lot better, even half a second per lap quicker than we were able to by trying to keep within the budget cap. So it would be quite the story if it's actually Mercedes or Ferrari that end up over the budget, not Red Bull. But obviously they were saying that with good confidence the Red Bull are over, but now Red Bull are saying, no, we are confident that we are under and within the limit. And even Christian Horner went on to clarify his perspective that he is effectively threatening legal action against Mercedes and Ferrari because of the statements that they made. Of course, they were coming out after the rumours circulated and saying, yeah, we heard that as well. Red Bull are over the budget, XYZ. They were, cheating, all these type of accusations coming through. And Christian Horner's like, well, look, that was unfounded. There was no evidence for that. Like, as it stands, the FIA has yet to make their decision. Like, those are defamatory statements against our organisation, and therefore our lawyers will be knocking on the door, is effectively what he is saying here. And even Max Verstappen, of course, understandably backing up his team boss in Horner, effectively saying, look, our understanding is that we are under the cap as our submission implied, and the other teams are just effectively, talking noise and should actually just keep their mouths shut, right? And kind of coalition with what Horner said, that these remarks were hugely defamatory. So rather spicy stuff, of course. And this is, of course, what Christian Horner went on to say. The FIA has stated, as they did, that they have not completed their process. So unless there is a clear withdrawal of those statements from Mercedes, Ferrari, Wolff, Binotto, whoever, we will be taking it extremely seriously. We will look at all options available to us, because it is absolutely unacceptable to be making the comments that were made yesterday, which are totally defamatory to the team, to the brands, and to Formula One. Toto Wolff replied and said, well, I didn't really see that interview, says maybe he should have got on to watch it, but actually saying that Horner is just all noise, right? So, I mean, look, it's been a good few months since we've had a nice little juicy bit of Horner versus Toto Wolff beef, but it's back on the menu, baby, because, yeah, this time last season it was all kicking off, and it's the same this time around with Horner saying we're going to bring the lawyers in, and Toto Wolff saying, well, it's just noise. He's just making stuff up effectively to pass the time. There's going to be these certificates on Wednesday, but like obviously both sides are confident, right? Because Wolff and the Ferrari guys wouldn't have said what they said if they weren't pretty sure that their rumours that they're hearing that they're over Red Bull, the cap, like are actually legitimate. But obviously Red Bull wouldn't be saying what they're saying if they weren't confident that they're under. So look, we'll see what the FIA come up with in the coming days on what their kind of announcements say. And as Toto Wolff goes on to say, right, he's confident the FIA will indeed do the right thing. But of course, what the FIA do and what they actually decide is a massive question, right? Because whether they actually take the decision to deduct drivers' championship points, which they could do if Red Bull are in breach from last season, that's the question that remains to be seen. Toto's perspective is like, look, I don't want to be in the shoes of the judges. He didn't want to make an explicit statement here, like he's too smart for that with the media and stuff, that Verstappen should be stripped of the title or anything. But as he says, at the end of the day, if you sit in a car that's maybe on steroids, then, it's not exactly fair, is his perspective here, right? So he's kind of saying, like, look, how do we police this in the future? This is a big litmus test, really, for how well this actually works, if indeed Red Bull are over. If they're not, then there really isn't any talking points here, and the lawyers are going to be knocking on the door, as I just mentioned. But look, we'll see, of course, how this works out. So very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comments section below. Just to mention a couple of interesting things to close out here. Firstly, this Aston Martin, they've made some good progress lately. They are now up to 7 7th in the Constructors, 37 points they have. And it is interesting, right, because everyone was roasting, maybe understandably to a degree, Alonso for leaving Alpine to go to Aston Martin. But race by race, it's looking more like a decent decision, because Aston Martin, they're making progress, and Alpine, their car is just an absolute disaster. Well, it's a good car, right? It's pretty quick, but yeah, it's not the most reliable thing in the world with double DNFs back in Singapore. So Aston Martin making good progress. Alfa Romeo have pretty much been nowhere since the first 5 races. So there is a decent chance that Aston Martin finish this season 6th, which would be quite the performance from them given the way they started out the year. But very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comments section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you are new, take care, and I'll see you next time.